You're listening to Back Pew Convos.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Sal. And this is the podcast God wants you to listen to.
So if you want to remain in God's will, have a sit down.
Grab a beverage of your choice.
And have a listen.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Shit. Are we even still recording?
Allegedly, at the top, the time is going. You see the little blue bars moving?
Yeah. I guess that's what we're going to go by.
That and faith.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, little faith.
Oh.
Paquito. Is poco. What is beverage of choice?
Diet Dew.
Yeah. That's actually usually my drink of choice as well.
Yeah.
Big Dew guy here.
Yeah. Well,
My eye's still twitching. Is it? Yeah, it's been doing that for like 3 weeks now. It could be due to all this gray in my beard that I never noticed until we decided to record our faces. That shows you how much I look in a mirror.
yeah. I've got plenty myself. In my hair and my bird.
In my hair. I don't have any hair.
Yikes. You used to. At some point, surely.
Yeah. Started leaving me about 18, unfortunately.
That's about when mine started getting gray, so there you go.
If I had hair on the top of my head, it would be too much. I'd be irresistible. So the good Lord said, I cannot do that.
Is that right?
Yeah. So he took my hair.
Feels like a lie.
As the thorn in my flesh, he took he took my hair.
Saul, why are you persecuting? So says Jesus.
No, why are you persecuting me? Buddy, it's just male pattern balding.
It can feel like that sometimes.
Yes. Is your spirit low? Are you getting bald? Do you have real big man titties? Yes, and yes. Man titties is a little bit related to the topic today.
I mean, a little bit. A smidge. Did Jesus have them?
Yeah. I guess it depends on how you would define it, but I would say he had nipples.
Well, yes. I would assume so. Whenever I think of that, though, I usually think of
Voluptuous. Voluptuous man breasticles. Yeah, I don't think Jesus was probably wasn't real overweight,
I would assume he wasn't overweight.
Probably a petite guy, I would say.
I know he also wasn't like Thor. He wasn't like how Mark Driscoll might imagine him.
Oh yeah.
Just like jacked to the gills.
Oh, you see, my mind went to the fat Thor. You remember from the
No. No.
because he did have man boobs.
Yeah, I was talking about like Thor.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, probably not. He was called a drunk and a glutton, but he also lived in first century Palestine and was dirt poor and homeless, so probably wasn't eating all that much.
Yeah.
Although he could make bread out of anything, apparently.
Yeah, but I get it, but he didn't.
That's true.
I mean, I don't think there was a ton of like Test and Tran running around trying to get all desert juicy.
Probably not. I don't think so. I didn't feel like he had a lot of time for weightlifting or anything like that.
Right. Just a dude.
Just a dude.
But more than a dude.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. And that's, I guess, what we're going to talk about, right?
Yeah, I guess we're going to talk about Jesus's humanity. What does it mean? What does it mean to say he was a man?
What does it mean?
It's a good question. I don't know. That's why we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, that's something to say right off the bat, I think. We don't know. So, I mean, we're going to speculate a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of so this has been something that's actually been really important to me and something that I've spent a whole lot of time thinking about lately. And my God.
This is messing everything up. I dropped my notes.
But so yes, I would definitely say that right off the bat, obviously we don't know anything. Um, but like you said, we can speculate on things, and to me, it is important. I mean, some people might, to some people, it might not be important. For where I'm at right now, it is of utmost importance. Of where I'm at in my theological journey, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, to some people, I don't know that it's that big a deal. But yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll see where we land.
I mean, I do think it's a big deal. I think it really, it kind of is everything.
Well, that's what I think. Yes.
I mean, if you really think about it, it's everything.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's part of why it's been so impressing and important on me. Is I feel like that's the one thing that, from my experience, I can only talk to my experiences, but from my experience within the evangelical world, it's the one thing about Jesus that we don't seem to take seriously. We have no problem thinking of Jesus as God, which is kind of weird because I'm reading Athanasius's on the incarnation,
Right.
and he, in that book, he goes. There's like certain sections where he like. There's a whole chapter where he's refuting the Jewish people and some of their complaints, and then there's a whole nother one where he's kind of refuting the Gentiles and some of the more popular Gentile complaints of his time. And one of the things that seemed to be a problem for that, which I mean, obviously, on the incarnation is the title of the paper, the book. So is they seem to have a problem with the idea of God being human, but kind of from the opposite angle that I feel like the evangelical world has today. Like, we don't have a problem seeing God as Jesus, but in doing so, I feel like we have a problem conceptualizing his humanity. We make him, I'm going to say the word, and it's kind of the opposite, but we make Jesus, I feel like, less human in order to make him more divine. And
Yeah.
to me, that, I mean, I guess just to jump right into it, to me, that makes the entire religion sort of nullified, I guess. Like, I don't know how I want to like really jump into it and get to it, but it sort of really takes away from the realness of it. I mean, like I said, it's very important to me because if he's God and less human than me, or different human even in a different way than me, then it's hard for me to conceptualize how anything that he says or does is applicable to me. You can't tell me to be like him if he's not like me. You know what I mean? Like, so
But yeah, this is going to be one where we probably are going to disagree.
oh, for sure. You surely knew that coming into it based on some of the recent conversations that we'd had. But
Yeah, I just do. I wonder, just like with anything else, I do wonder if we're going to end up agreeing more than we disagree. It might be those details, or it might just be like a flat out disagreement on this one.
it
Not
could be a
sure.
flat out disagreement. But what I've noticed in some of the conversations that we've had through text is that it seems like our final product, where the finish line, where we end up, is usually pretty close to the same place. But how we get to
Yeah.
that finish line is usually vastly different.
Yeah.
But anyway, that kind of sets the scene for my like why this is important to talk about for me, right? Like, I feel like that's the one thing that we take for granted with Jesus. We don't have a problem imagining Jesus as God, but what in doing so, what we tend to do, in my opinion, is to lessen his humanity. And by saying lessen his humanity, I don't mean that. That's why I said it's kind of the opposite. Like, I don't mean that he's less than me, but he's human, less human aspects because those are replaced by divine aspects. if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, something that this is just within the last couple days, as we were talking about this, I've I feel like I've had this like moment of clarity that I think, and while I don't really know how to fully articulate it, and I don't know that it solves everything, I do think that it's something that has brought a lot of clarity to this issue for me, and that is that. So I think well, first let me say I think that you're right that like we either tend to make Jesus only human and not God, or only God and not human, focusing on one or the other, or I think we another thing that we do is try to divvy it up somehow and say like, well, whenever he's asleep in the boat, that's his humanness,
Right.
but when he calms the storms, that's his godness.
Right.
And I just don't think that that's the truth. I think he's always what he is, which is fully God and fully man.
Right.
There's no division of like he's turning it on and off some at certain points. You know,
Which sounds, this is another one of those things that sounds ridiculous when you say it that way. Like, of course he doesn't have a switch, so he just flips on and off. But, like, think about some of the things that we say. Like,
yeah. I mean, that's how I've thought about it at times. Not with the switch analogy. Like if you had put it that way to me, I would have been like,
right.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of what we end up doing. I think sometimes whenever we read through those stories, we think like, oh well, this is look how human he is. He's sleeping. Oh, look how godly he is. He's calming the storm with his voice.
Right.
Like we don't even realize that we've just created a separation.
Right. It's a really good example of something that a theme that we've talked about in past episodes about how people tend to say things without thinking all the way through the implications. Like we tend to, and I mean, me and you still do it all the time. Like, I catch myself doing it, I catch you doing it, but I mean, we do it all the time where it seems like we say things, but sometimes just because that's the way it's been told to us or that's the way we've, understood it, but you can tell, like, if you take a minute to think through what we're saying, you're like, oh, wait, and then I think that this is a perfect example of that. Like, there's a lot of things that you can say about Jesus that like make sense on face level until you think it all the way through, and then it becomes one of those situations like you're explaining where it's like, oh, so you think Jesus has like an on-off switch where he's just now I'm Jesus or now I'm God, now I'm man, now I'm God, now I'm man. Like,
Yeah, I think that that's to some extent, I really do think that that's sort of inevitable. I think that whether we're consciously aware of it or not, I think that we end up at some point or another we end up contradicting ourselves.
yeah,
We're not always aware of it, and sometimes we are aware of it, and then we can address it. But I think a lot of times we're just unaware of the contradiction between what we're saying over here and then what we're saying over here,
right.
you know? And that's gonna come through in this conversation, I'm sure. I'm probably gonna contradict myself a couple
I'm
times
sure I will too. I
as
mean,
we're talking through
we are
this.
human beings, so
Well, and so that reminds me, like and this is probably honestly gonna be the crux of the disagreement, I think, between us.
the cross of the
Yes.
disagreement, the crux.
Because the way you said this earlier was talking about um, if Jesus isn't just like me, and so I think what's implied in that is that we know what we are, or we know what we're supposed to be, or that we know what it means to be a human and what it means to be God. And so whenever we look at Jesus, we're saying, well, I know what it means to be God, and I know what God is supposed to look like, and what we have our list of attributes, all knowing, all powerful, all these things. And I know what it means to be a human, and so Jesus is those things. But what we don't realize, I think, a lot of times, is that we're projecting onto Jesus our own assumptions about what it means to be a human and what it means to be God, rather than looking to Jesus for Jesus to show us and tell us what it means to be human and what it means to be God.
Possibly, to an extent, possibly. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe you'll just have to explain yourself a little more. On face value, my mind says there's part of me that says, yeah, possibly. And then the other part of me automatically thinks of a lot of problems with that assumption and that approach and kind of thinks it's nonsense in a respectful way. I mean, well, just immediately, we've already kind of had this conversation. Like, I think when you start saying things like that, what it really delves into is like, well, then what's even the point? What's the point of our show? What's the point in any of this? Because that up means down, down means up. We don't know anything. We're no like, if we don't even know what it means to say to what it is to be a human, now, that doesn't mean that we would ever fully comprehend, but if we don't know what it means to be human, it's the same thing that we've said about love. If how can you know what love? We have to have a base understanding of what love is, or there's no point. You know what I mean? Like we have to have some sort of base understanding as what it means to be a human, or what are we even talking about? Like this whole thing is pointless.
Well, yes and no. So like I agree to the extent of like I mean I've said it myself as far as like we have to know what goodness is to some extent, something that is congruent
Right.
to even say that God is good. We have to have some sort of conception of goodness, beauty, truth, love. We have
Right.
to have some sort of genuine conception that's congruent with the truth of the matter in order to for the language that we use to mean anything at all.
Right.
Like so there is that, and I do understand that, and I agree with that, but I don't think that what I'm saying necessarily is a slippery slope
Right.
to that.
Well, and that's why I said that we would have to just, like, I mean, there's a possibility because, to be fair, I mean, that is sort of how I conceptualize it too. Like, that's how, I'm in non-dualist thought. That's sort of the crux of the whole thing is like the you that you think you are is just a construct. It's a essentially like to try to dumb it down into in words. It's like creating a character based on your experiences and your memories and your emotions and all of these things over the years have been collected and compiled in your brain to make this character, and that's me. That's who I am. I am Nathan Sutherland, son of Billy and Tammy Sutherland. I have, like this is a profile or a character that has been developed, but that's not the true who I am. Who I am at the core, the person that's asking, who am I, is that spirit within, which is the breath of God that was breathed into mankind at the beginning. Like that's how all this whole that when I say non-dualist, that's what I'm talking about. Like it's we all come from that same source, which is God, and that animates us. It's that breath from Genesis that makes us a living being. You know what I mean? And so, like from that perspective, like yeah, that's kind of the way I envision it too. Is like we don't even know who we are, and that's the whole point of figuring like of the non-dualist thought is we finally understand like oh this I that I think I am isn't the true I in the after all. This is just a construct.
So maybe I guess the language that I would use, and maybe it's saying the same thing, just using different language, is that God is the ground of all being.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
But and the point being though is like so from that perspective I agree with what you're saying. Like we don't know who we are. That's kind of the whole point. You know what I mean?
Without Jesus.
What do you mean without Jesus? We don't know who we are without Jesus. Yes, yes, yes. That's the whole point in like in relationship or finding Jesus, so to speak, or whatever. Like is to find out who we truly are.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I think the way that I've worked conceptualize it currently is it's that divine breath, which is the spirit. I mean, the breath is the way it's translated in most versions, I think, but the word is spirit. It's the spirit that God breathes into man in Genesis, right? Which that's what I think, and that's what I think though is so unique about being human is that all the rest of the creation was formed right out of just word, I guess. But what was unique about man was that it was formed out of the earth, so it's earth, it's matter. But then what made it a living being was the breath of God, so it's divine. It's that mixture of earth and divine that makes man man. Jesus is the archetype of that. He is God and man. Like it's all the same picture.
Yes. Yes, we are what we are because of what he is, who he is. Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, so the case is closed. See, we agree.
Not even close. We haven't kind of scratched the surface on this yet.
No, not even close.
Um, because so here is another thing that, as I was thinking through why we disagree
Yeah.
in the way that we do today, as I was thinking through that a little bit today, I think one thing is that. So let me just ask: Is does Jesus change humanity?
Does Jesus change humanity?
Yes. Like, is there any change brought about? We both would say there's no change on God's part, but does God becoming man in this person named Jesus of
Right.
Nazareth, does that change humanity?
Well, you see, and I think that that is actually, before we even get to that, is where most of my questions, and I say it that way intentionally, questions
Yeah.
and concerns and thoughts come about, is because traditionally, yes, it all Jesus is the person that lived 2,000 years ago is the sort of the axis point of all of this occurring.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much sense that makes to me anymore. Now, I still it still makes sense to me from a perspective of Jesus exemplifying it, what it means to be that true human, that divine human, to live out Christ consciousness, whatever, like however you want to phrase it. That makes sense to me. But I think that's not what you're asking. You're asking, I
Yeah.
think, more of a, I don't know what the right wording is, because the wording that comes to my mind is supernatural, and I know that's not the right wording. But
No, I don't think I would say supernatural. I guess I kind of put it in this way in text. Um, but I guess and so let me just define the term. Like, it because I think what I'm hearing when
yes,
you're saying this is that in a metaphorical sense, yes,
right,
or that like by way of exemplifying a perfect human life,
right.
Jesus as an example to look towards perhaps changes us.
I think that's fair.
Um, but what I would say is so I think that mm,
And well, I don't see it. That's the thing. This is such a big conversation. Like I want to even explain more what that means, but I don't want to cut you off, and I want to hear what you're going to say.
well, all I was going to say was like I think the word that I'm looking for maybe is metaphysically
Metaphysically, yeah,
and
there
not
you go.
metaphorically, but metaphysically. Metaphysically meaning like a reality that we can't conceptualize well or articulate well in our humanness,
Yeah,
but like a reality that is a reality nonetheless, whether we can articulate it well or not.
right. I know what you mean.
So I think that like where you're saying that Jesus changes something metaphorically, perhaps through his example of his life lived, I'm going further than that and saying yes to that, but going further than that and saying that I think that there is a reality that we can't articulate that Jesus really does change humanity.
Right.
That humanity is made or remade. I don't know if remade. I think that Athanasius uses the language of remade, but I don't know how much sense that makes to me. But like being made in the image of God through this person named Jesus, even though we can't articulate that well, and that's what this whole episode's about, is trying to articulate it
Right.
in some way. But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I'm taking it a step further than that.
Yeah. I understand what you mean,
Yeah,
and I'm not closing the door on that. I'm open to that. I'm
right,
just saying that where I'm at today, at this point in time, I don't know how much sense that makes to me.
right.
And really, I mean, I guess it's such a complicated thing because I mean again for me this whole thing is built upon the very beginning of the story in Genesis. Like it's so many different things interwoven together, right? Like it's how penal substitution doesn't make any sense. It's how all these different things don't make any sense because it ties back to this, like, which is essentially the reality that always was that there was no separation between God and mankind. God lived in mankind. He always has lived in mankind. But the delusion, the separation was in mankind's mind, right? And so I feel like the way that, at least the way that I currently conceptualize it, is that the Christ has always been in man, but it was Jesus that awoke to that reality, and therefore, because he awoke to that reality, it's available for us to walk in his path, his way that he had made.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I, yeah, we disagree on that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and like I said, I'm just trying to put all this stuff together. I
yeah, yeah.
mean, I'm not. That's how it makes sense to me today. And like I said, it's because everything else ties into it for me. I mean, it really is when I'm like I usually use very strong language intentionally. I wanted to avoid using strong language, but I can't because it really is that important to me. Like everything ties into it. Like if this falls apart, I don't know what I have left.
Well, that's interesting that you feel that way. I think just from my perspective, of looking outside of what you're dealing with internally, it seems. I think that's interesting because to me, we're basically right there. It's just everything that I'm going to say is Jesus. You just add Jesus to everything you're saying, and then I think we agree, really. I guess I don't see how Jesus being the Christ changes any of that you just said.
Well, it changes it because there had to have been a separation. That God wasn't in man until Jesus. That means millions of people walk the face of the earth. Everything like we are looking at Jesus as if I think at least from this perspective that you're talking about, we're looking at Jesus as the beginning of time, but you're talking about millions of people that existed before Jesus that lived in parts of the world who never even heard of Israel or Hebrew people, and like none of this stuff would be applicable to them. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
I mean, I know what you're saying, but I think that w- that's getting at the very thing that I mentioned before, which is that I think that we're taking our ideas of space and time and knowledge and power and all of that and projecting onto God and onto Jesus what we think that already means. So like I don't think that because I don't think that God is because I believe Jesus is fully God and I believe that God is not bound by space and time, I think that we can say things precisely what you're saying, and like the fourth man in the fire with the three Hebrew children, like that. I think that was actually Jesus. Like the hand that wrote the Ten Commandments. I think that's the hand of Jesus. I think that and Jesus says this himself. He says, "Before Abraham was, I am."
yes.
And he says,
See, and even in saying that, I am on board with all that. And this is actually, now that you're talking about this, I think where the real separation is that I understand all of that and agree with all that. But to me, that's Christ. That's the universal spirit of God that has always been present on the earth.
and I'm just saying that that's Jesus.
Exactly. To me, Jesus is a man that lived 2,000 years ago. But the Christ, which is the divine, the God of him, the God in him, has always been. Has always been in every man that existed before Jesus of Nazareth was born and has lived ever since then. It's the breath of God that God breathed into mankind in the Garden of Eden. That's the Christ to me.
Right. And what I
Oop,
guess,
that's something I'm gonna have to get used to.
yeah.
I talk with my hands way too much.
But what? So like, all I'm adding to that though is that Jesus is the Christ. Yes to everything you just said, but Jesus is the Christ. So to me, Jesus isn't just a man who has this Christ within him. That Jesus is the Christ, and actually, the Scripture says that multiple times. I think both Paul and John say that Jesus is the Christ. So I think that to me, that's the only difference is that, but it's a big difference.
Yeah, it
It's a
is. It's a
ginormous
huge
difference.
difference. That's what I'm saying too. It is to me that is the difference. That's the difference, but it's a
Yeah.
huge difference. And to me, that changes everything.
So what would that change for you?
I mean, it changes everything because so then the Christ in you, the divine in you, isn't you. It's not a part of you at all. It's Jesus. You're associating the divine within man with a person, an individual.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, it's whatever we say about Jesus is therefore not applicable to us. Like again, it goes back to like the resurrection thing. He's God, I'm not. Whatever he does, it's not applicable to me. If he's man like I am, then whatever he does is applicable to me.
I think it's applicable. I think every single thing that he does is applicable to us because he is this one who is fully God and fully man.
Doesn't make any sense to me. Zero sense. Like that to me, that's one of those things that, and this is, don't you get mad at me for saying this because it's going to come across sounding harsh, but I
Okay.
don't mean it to sound harsh. That's one of those things that sounds really good religiously, but it means nothing.
It means everything to me, but
Like that's what I hear when I hear things like that. It's like it sounds like that's one of those things that you're going to say in a church and everybody's going to say amen, but like think through what that means. Like to me it doesn't mean anything. It's hollow.
I don't see how it's meaningless unless we're saying that Jesus has to be this certain thing that I am calling human and that I'm calling God and projecting that onto him.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying at the outset. He has to be human.
Yes, he is human. And that's why I asked you the question about what does he change? Because if Jesus does in fact change humanity, that means that humanity and is changing humanity, uh, then if that's true, that there's real change that happens, I guess what I'm trying to get at is the fallenness. That there are things that seem very real to us as like human.
Right.
There's even what's the old saying? To err is human, to forgive is divine, or whatever. Like, yeah, like you could say to err is human, and that seems like it's a very real thing. That's a reason that phrase has been so popular for so long. But but no, actually, in fact, to be human is not to err because Jesus was fully human and he didn't err. You know, like that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that Jesus is the like as we've said before that there's only ever been two humans, Adam and Jesus. Like I think that Jesus shows us what humanity is supposed to be. Like he's the true human. And so
That's what I already said.
well, I don't see how it's not connecting how it's I guess I don't understand why it's connecting so differently for the both of us.
Right.
Because
Well, that's why this discussion it is a spirited discussion, but I don't mean it in a way of like aggressive, but it
right.
is because we are seemingly so close, but so far away. And that's what I've been trying to tell you through text. Is like it seems like we are this close and at the same time a mile apart. And I would admit, like your position that you're holding is probably the more evangelical position, like for sure,
I
certainly.
would say orthodox. I wouldn't use evangelical, but yeah.
Well,
I know what
either
you're saying.
one. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Because I
yeah,
think a lot of what I'm saying evangelicals would have a hard time with, but
really,
I think so.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know, and because again, I really have a hard time with the whole we don't even know what it means to be human. Like on to an extent, I get that, but to another extent, all that's doing to me is making Jesus, just like I said at the onset, it makes him less human. Like he's not relatable to us in any way. He's other than us. He's completely different. Like
Yeah, I just don't see it that way. I think that he's relatable to us in that trying to think of who said this. I mean, you really could just pick any early church figure and they've probably said it in one way or another, but I think that uh, is it Gregory of Nazianzus that says one of the Gregories says that which is not assumed is not healed. And he also says that God became human so that the human could become God. And so what I think Jesus is doing is he is taking on not just he's not just becoming it's not so what I see is happening is Jesus is not just that God is becoming a human, but that God is taking on human being itself. And so I think what's happening in Jesus as he lives his life throughout all the stages of life, he is assuming all of humanity. It's not that, so everything that he says and does is applicable to us because he is living that the whole of human existence in one sense, past, present, and future. He is taking upon himself all of humanity. So how could it not be applicable?
I don't understand how. I don't understand.
Well, and the how of it is where I don't know. It's
I don't see to me like that's another one of those things that sounds really good, and then I'm like, okay, but how? Like, how? What's the logic behind that? Like, how does that work? How did like? Because again, I don't think it. I mean, again, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that's why I said like the way that I've got it worked out now, everything's tied into it because I can make everything work. Like, I, from creation to eschatology to atonement theories to everything, I can make it work. But we start talking about stuff like what you're saying, to me, that doesn't work. Like, I can't make that work in my mind. It doesn't make any sense. Like I said, even in saying that, like, in Jesus, the man that existed 2,000 years ago, that's what we're talking. When we say Jesus, that's what we're talking about,
yes,
right?
yeah,
He's putting on humanity there. That means there's or not even 2,000 because we're looking backwards in time. That means there's literally millions of years to where God wasn't in humanity. That's what you're saying.
no,
I know that's not what you're saying, and that's what frustrates me. Is because like I feel like that's what frustrates me about a lot of Christianity right now, currently where I'm at in my life. Is again, I said the same thing about the Bible. It says like we say one thing and we mean something else, and that but it frustrates the heck out of me, man.
well, see, what's frustrating to me about what you're saying there is because I still think, to me, it's what makes that what you're saying, your objection there, what how that makes sense to me is because again, I don't think that God is bound by space and time, and I
But you
believe
just said it was the man that was born 2,000 years ago. That's why I asked you that question.
yes, but this man born 2,000 years ago is the one who was with God in the very beginning, the one who spoke all things into existence, the one through whom all things were created, and not anything that was created without him. Like, that's what I'm saying, is that Jesus is the one that, even though he shows up, as far as like, to your point, as far as like, if we're looking at history as like a linear time, like, yeah, he shows up in the middle somehow. This is Maximus Confessor. Like, he shows up in the middle of time, but somehow he is this one from the very beginning, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end.
Yeah,
Uh,
sorry. The
No,
somehow is because he's God. Yes,
yeah,
I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's why we have such this discussion is so interesting, and we And we get so frustrated with each other over it. It's because we are saying the same thing, but we have such different ways of understanding it.
And unless I'm misunderstanding, because to me, just to be honest, what the way that you're talking about Jesus seems to me to be doing kind of what I said at the beginning. It seems like it's an overemphasis on the humanity and well, even maybe even perhaps a wrong conception of humanity is kind of what I'm thinking, and then a lessening of the divine nature.
Yeah, I think that is just a misunderstanding because I
Yeah,
think his humanity is his divine nature. Again, going back to Genesis, it's earth and the breath of God that makes man. There is no separation.
I think I know what you're saying.
That's not my whole point. Is that in trying to make Jesus less human and more divine, which is what I don't think that's what you're doing, but that's what it seems like to me. We're actually lessening his divinity. It's the very fact that he is man, he's earth, and the breath of God that makes him God on earth. Like that's what I conceptualize when I think of God within, or the Christ is what I call the God within. It is the God, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. But it's in Jesus is a man that lived 2,000 years ago. So it's the divine encapsulated within a man. The Christ is the spirit, the divine part of the man, Jesus. But it's the same spirit that's in you. It's the same spirit. There's one God. God is one. But yet Jesus quoted the Psalms and said, do not even your own scriptures say you are gods. That word that's translated as God is gods. That's a translation. It's Elohim. You are Elohim. Like that's the spirit within us. That's our consciousness. That's the I am.
Mhm. So I think I know what you're saying, but to me, it's still missing something.
Maybe. That's why we're having this discussion.
So I kind of got like I had a thought in the middle and then I lost it of like what you were saying there. Um, I'm not gonna have you just repeat everything you said.
I couldn't. I couldn't. That was the Holy Spirit talking through me. That was the I am within speaking without.
Well, so like, uh, okay, so you're saying that Jesus's divinity is the same divinity that we have.
Yes, there's one source. There is one God. There is one source. There is one Spirit.
So then, how is Jesus unique in any way, other than he just was an enlightened man that came to this conclusion?
That's my question to you. Like, yes, that's what I've been trying to tell you this whole time.
No, I don't. We just disagree on that. Because to me, Jesus isn't just another guy.
Well, see, first of all, well, when I say first of all, it sounds like I'm about to like get in a race match with you, and I didn't mean it like that. But that's something that I've thought about because we've had a little bit of this conversation before, maybe not to this in depth. And that's what, like, you've said that before of like, I don't think Jesus is just a man. No, the whole point is that there is no thing as just a man. Mankind is divine.
Yeah,
There is one begotten Son, which is the Christ, which is within all of us. That's again going back to the 99 and the one. That's why the emphasis is always on the one, but the emphasis really should be on the 100 because the sonship, the son isn't whole if even one of us is missing. Until we all come into the understanding that we are Christ, Christ isn't whole. There's still one sheep missing. He's got to find every one of the sheep.
well, I agree with that. Obviously, I'm a uni, so I agree with that. But
Well, I think you agree with that, but the emphasis I'm making is that there's one. I think that you agree with that in this perspective is that there's 100 individual sheeps that need to be found. I'm telling you, there's only one. Like
mm, well, insofar as
that, we all make up one. We're seeing little individuals. There's one spirit behind all of us.
well, yeah, there's one spirit, but there we are.
This is the heart of non-dualism. Now we're getting at it.
Yeah, I mean, so that's part of it, but I don't want to go there yet. Well, now I don't know what I was gonna say. That's not that. I already lost it. So, what did you say before you started talking about the 99 and 1?
Oh, we already moved on to the 99 and 1 now.
I want to go back though. What did you say before that? Well,
um, was it about the one spirit behind all?
mm,
Because I only brought up the 99 and the 1 just to emphasize the fact that, like, there's one, oh, it's the sonship. There's one begotten son, right? Which is, that's what I was talking about.
so mm, I don't care to get into non-dualism, but I think there's a lot more to say before we get to it.
Right.
Still,
And that's fine. I mean, really, this episode wasn't intended to be non-dualism. It's just that it's hard to talk about Jesus's humanity. It's especially hard for me and you to talk about it without getting into that, because I feel like that's sort of the crux of where we diverge on what we see as Jesus's humanity. Like,
maybe. I mean, I still think that there's an issue of what does it mean to be human? Like for me,
yeah,
because I think that Jesus is the true human.
okay, let's talk about that.
So like I guess what I'm saying is like
You course correct us here. Talk
well
about it.
so like well let's just think about like we already mentioned the time. Think about time, right?
Yeah,
Like God's relation to time. Like that. What I'm saying basically is that Jesus is the one that is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. That somehow shows up in the middle of time for on our understanding of it. And then there's the idea of like we've talked about before that like Jesus flips upside down our human ideas of what power is.
right.
And I think he does the same thing with knowledge and like our knowing. So like whenever Jesus says no one knows the hour, the day or the hour except for the Father, right? That what I don't think that what's going on there is that Jesus is saying that like the Father has like I don't think that God's knowing or God's knowledge is like something you could pull up on a computer like data, like raw data. I think that his knowing is more experiential than that. I think that his knowing is like because God exists outside of space and time. I think that um, them asking the question and then Jesus responding, "No one knows the day or hour," isn't him saying that the father is withholding information from him that like the father has this like raw data that he's withholding from the son. I think that he's saying that you're asking the wrong question, that the fullness of time, the completion of the fullness of time isn't um, something that happens on a linear time scale. It's something it's a summing up of all of time at once. So like I don't think but I think that I just bring that up to show an example of like, so why doesn't Jesus? So why does Jesus put that on the Father and not the Son, or and not like you know what I mean? Like the that's an example of it seeming like Jesus is like limiting his godness to some extent. You know what I mean?
Yes, I mean, yeah,
It can seem that way.
yeah. I mean, yes. Let's just keep it simple. Yes.
So like I think that they're which I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't have went this direction. But what I was gonna say about it, the only reason I brought it up is because I was just thinking like as far as like things needing to make sense to us.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going with it. It's because like there's a lot of examples like that where like Jesus seems perfectly fine to just say like I don't know, I don't need to know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which, if he was a man, that would make perfect sense.
But I think it also makes sense for him being God because God's knowing isn't like what day and hour is the coming of the Son of Man. His knowing is beyond space and time. It's beyond days and hours itself.
Right. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think that in that moment he's being human and not God.
Right. I don't think you can separate the two. They're one and the same, from my perspective. I'm just saying,
Right.
for me. For me. I mean, that's why I think, like, I take even that whole, you can't set, like, you can't switch the switch on and off to an even further step, like, because to me there is no, like, yeah, he Jesus doesn't know those things because he's a man. Like, he is a full, you can't be fully man if you have the not full knowledge of God. Then you wouldn't be fully man. Like, and I only let me say it like this, because I already know where you're going to go with that.
Maybe.
Is that part of being a man is not knowing everything? Like, if we were, we would be God, right? Like,
It depends on what God's knowing is.
right.
That's my
I
point.
mean, I guess, yeah, that's what I'm saying is like, if you, that's, I'm trying to think through this from like the perspective, because I've heard a lot of people who actually think that like Jesus, even though he was a human, they say Jesus was fully human, but they also think like he still had all these God attributes as far as like omnipotent, which I don't know how that works if you're in omnipotence. I understand. Omnipresent. That's the one I don't really get, but they still think he's all the omnis. But like, I feel like if you have that, that's like a key piece. That's literally what it means to be a human being. Like, you don't, if you're though, I don't see how you can claim to be human if you're not experiencing life from our perspective. And you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's almost kind of the same thing that you were saying to me the other day, which, I mean, we can explore that a little bit, because, I'm thinking through this too, is as far as like, when I was talking through some of this with you, you said, well, I can't calm a storm with my words, or walk on water. And it's like, I mean, yeah, that's kind of a big deal for me, because if you're not experiencing life as I'm experiencing it, then I don't see how you can claim to be living life as a human. Like, that's changed. That's what I mean when I say, I feel like sometimes we say like, no, Jesus was fully human and fully divine. He suffered everything that we suffered and went through everything that I went through. But at the same time, we say he's got all this power. He's got all knowledge. He's omnipresent, omnipotent, all these omnis that like we don't have access to. Then it's like, well, then how did you live? How did you suffer anything that I suffered? You didn't experience life through my eyes, because you know what I'm trying to say? You know what I'm trying to get through? Like,
Yeah, but I think that that is because we are making certain assumptions about what those omnis mean and about what it means for God to be all knowing, all powerful. Like, even in the omnipresence, what does Jesus say? He says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. Like, that is him. How is that not him being present there? You know? If you're doing it to him, it's Jesus
you
there.
already know what I've got the answer for there. Like,
But to you, it's a Christ consciousness and not Jesus.
it's the
Whereas to me,
crux.
it's Jesus.
I mean, and I get, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we ever get past that. I don't know that we ever change that. Like, yeah, I think what he's talking about there is, I don't even know if it's fair to call it Christ consciousness, because some people have certain assumptions about that. Like, I think it's literally God within. Like, he is, like, when he says, before Abraham was, I am, like, he's saying, I am. That's God. Like, it's the divine within him. So, like, I believe that same divinity's within all of us. So, like, when he says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me, yeah, it's the same spirit is in me that was in him. Like, you're literally doing it. There is no separation. It's all one. It comes back to one source of life, one consciousness.
Yes, but maybe no. It's just one of those things where, like, I think we are kind of saying the same thing,
Right. Yeah, I
but
think it
not
is
really.
too. Yeah. It's crazy, man, because even through some of this, one conversation. There's been times when I felt like we were literally on not even reading the same book. And then there's other times that I feel like we're in the same sentence, like saying the same things. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, I just really do think that there's something at least to think about when it comes to like God's knowing and what it means to be human, actually. Because like to say that Jesus hasn't experienced all that, I think that he is actively experiencing all of it.
You're definitely a non-dualist at heart. You're all over it, man.
I, because I mean, I think that that is the whole point. I think that like this was one thing that like I've told the story here before, but like I had that moment when I was at work,
Yeah,
whenever I was trying to start thinking about maybe like is there anything to this whole Jesus and God thing anymore? Do I believe any of it? And like I had pretty well decided I didn't, and I was trying to figure out, give it another go, you know, like try to figure out like am I is there anything to this? And I had this moment at work where I had all these questions in mind and all these things, and then like all of a sudden it was like I don't know how else to put it, like a download. It was like it all these thoughts kept started rushing through my mind, and it was like all these hard questions that I had. It was like I had some answer all of a sudden for it.
right.
And I rushed, ran away from my machine, grabbed some pen and paper, and started writing stuff down. And one of the things on that list was that you know, one of my questions was about the problem of evil and like human suffering. Well, not just human suffering, but like suffering in general in the world. And this is what I wrote. I said, I don't know, but God, I don't know the why of it or the how of it, but I believe that God is actively suffering with those who suffer. That was what I wrote down.
Right.
And that has only been something that has become more and more real to me the more that I actually get into the study of the theology behind it and all of that. And I think that so to me it's definitely that Jesus is experiencing what it means to be truly human. He's experiencing that suffering and he's experiencing our experience of humanity while he himself is living out humanity to its perfection.
That's my eyes just twitching. It's I'm not like blinking at
I
you or
wasn't even looking at that.
whatever.
I was just looking at you because you were looking at me and I wasn't
I'm
sure.
just listening and trying to take in what you're saying. I'm actually listening to you. I'm trying to like I don't just want to listen to respond, you know what I mean? Like I'm soaking it in. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
But and it's also one of those things where we talked about this a little bit. It's hard. Language is hard, man.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
hard because as you're saying that, this voice inside my head is like, "Yes, amen. Why can't you see it, Sean? Like you are there, man."
And I'm thinking the same thing about you.
But the funny thing is, it's because I think that we are in the same, like our finish line is at the same place. I think that we come to the same conclusion, and that's why we think that way. Like, but it's that language and that like the different ways of conceptualizing how to get to that finish line that makes you feel the way that you feel and the way that I feel too. Like, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, every like literally the last several things that you said, I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% with you. So keep going, buddy. Like, yeah, just keep going down that path. Like,
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying there is like because what I hear when you're talking about like Jesus and
mhm.
like he has to be this. And what this is humanity as I know it. To me, humanity is what Jesus lives out. Like what it means to be truly human is that. And he suffers with us in our humanity, in our the fallenness that we have brought into the world. He suffers that with us and for us, um, and as
I
us.
was gonna
But
say add the as us too.
and as us, but um, he also lived the perfect human life. He showed us what it means to be truly human. So like from that perspective, I think that Go ahead.
No, I don't know that I have anything constructive to add. Like I hear what you're saying, and that argument frustrates me a little bit in a not in a, like I'm angry kind of way, but like it is frustrating to me because I feel like that's one of those arguments that like we're just redefining terms, and like there is no endpoint to that. Like it's like up is down, down is up, and like I can't get past that. Like to me, you know what I mean? Like I know because we on a theoretical level, I do understand what you're saying, right? Like whatever you conceptualize being a human like isn't really being a human. Being a human is like what Jesus says being a human is like. Okay, like theoretically I get that, but like okay, what does that mean practically? Like then that means I don't know what it means to be a human apparently. So like
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying.
yeah, but I mean there's no I guess the point to me like is at that point there's no point in even having the discussion anymore. Like we can't to me that discussion always devolves into like well apparently we just don't know anything. Like there's no reason to discuss anything anymore. There's no because we continue to redefine terms. You know what I mean? Like to where like
Well, I don't think it's redefining if the definition is wrong in the first place. I think it's just defining it rightly. You know what I mean?
no. I mean, I'm trying to understand. I really am trying to understand, but I'm really having a hard time with this one.
Well, like to redefine something, the way I'm understanding that, whenever you're saying that, like to redefine it would mean that like we have this definition that works, and then we're trying to say it doesn't mean this isn't the definition anymore. Let's give it this definition. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the definition that we had before doesn't work. We need the true definition of it, and the true definition of it is what we see in Jesus.
No, I mean, I think that you're making the assumption of like you added the word worked in there, works in there, as if like you don't even have to add that word. It's just what we know. Like this is my lived experience, and I have no other way to conceptualize the world or define the world. I have no other way to conceptualize what it's like to be a human, other than my lived experience. And so, if we're gonna say like we're gonna flip that upside down and say no, you actually don't know what it means to be a human. This is whatever else it means to be a human. Well, then like that's redefining the term. Like I have even not even saying it's a right definition, but I have a definition, like a conception of what this means, and we're redefining that to be something completely different that I have no conception of.
I don't think it's that you don't have any conception of it, though. I think that because I think that what being truly human is to so like experientially, this is one thing that you and I have talked about before. Like experientially, it's hard for me to see the finished work because I can see my own Adamness,
Right.
right? My own fallenness. That's my experience, but is that the truth? No, no, I don't think that that's the truth of what humanity is or is should be or will be.
Right.
I think that the truth of what humanity is supposed to be is Jesus' life. And I have not lived that life yet. But that life is being lived out in me and through me, and it will be, but it's not yet. Right? So like I guess what I'm getting at is the fallenness of I'm failing to see how you're figuring in the fallenness of of humanity into this picture
Right.
because I think that there was genuinely something wrong.
Yeah.
It broken or marred the image of God within.
Well, that's the very difficult thing is to me the fallenness of man is the very separation that we've kind of been talking about. It's this under this false idea that we're separate from God, that God isn't he's out there, he's different from us, he's far away from us. Like we've
That's
been
not what you're saying.
exiled. I know that's not what you're saying, but to me that's what the fallenness is. It's we are individuals. I am me, Jesus is him, you are Sean, God is God out there. Like to me that is the fallenness. Like that's the delusion from the beginning. Mankind and God to me, the Garden of Eden, the story in the beginning of Genesis, the fall of man is God, man in union, oneness. That's the whole story of the exile and the falling out and being exiled out of the Garden of Eden is this false conception of separation that we have. To me, that is the very like the fact that we're trying to separate Jesus from us and make him out there is the fallenness to me. Like that's the
Yeah.
crux. Dang it, I keep doing that. Sorry. To me, that is the crux of the problem. Like,
So I'm not trying to make a separation there, but what I am saying is that okay, so let's just going with this. What is the outworking of that believing the lie of separation? What how does that work itself out within humanity?
what do you mean?
What's the result of it? What's the result of the fall in your
Oh, well, because we are it's the exact opposite of loving your neighbors yourself. Like this essentially was my response to Katie was like what kind of society would you want to live in? Like to me it's a return back. It's the kingdom of God. It's where there is no division between me and you because if there is, I'm looking out for me and mine. Like even that's why I've said before on this podcast like I don't know that you can truly ever love your neighbor as yourself as long as you continue to see an other. We have to lose the borders of them and me, others. Like until then, I think that you can love someone pretty hard, but there's always going to be me and mine and an other. Like we have to lose. Like to so, what is the outworking of that fallenness? It's just more and more self-centeredness. It's more and more ostracization. It's more and more violence against the other. It's that the only way to cure that is to lose this idea of separation. And as long as there's a you and me, a USA and an Iraq, as long as there's a Democrat and a Republican, as long as we continue to make borders and separate people, we're only going to devolve into nothingness, as Athanasius puts it. Like,
right. So like to me, that is what I mean when I talk about the image of and this I mean I'm borrowing the language of Athanasius, but the the image of God in humanity being marred and needing to be recreated or redrawn or uh, remade, recreated, and that's what Jesus does. And that to me, when I talk about like what change Jesus brings upon humanity, that's what I'm talking about.
I'm with it. I can dig it.
But I guess I fail to see outside of us just looking at Jesus and saying, "There's an example of what it means."
Yeah,
Like I don't know what Jesus changes in that respect on your view.
right.
And that I guess that it really is the big difference there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to like even push back again. Yeah, I mean, that is to me in Jesus, you have an example of like he didn't see an other anymore. Like he literally lived it out. He took it to the cross. Like
Yeah.
there is no violence against those who oppress me. There is no violence against my enemy because there is no enemy. There's only the one. You know what I mean? And so, like, yes, I mean, yeah, that's how I conceptualize that. Yeah, I'm not.
Okay. So I mean, I guess so. Then the only difference, I guess, for me is that I like we said at the beginning, I would take it a step further beyond just Jesus as like an example
Right,
to follow. That like he, in some way that I can't explain, is affecting reality, like his life,
right,
not just by example, but like in some real tangible way, is affecting all of reality.
right. Yeah, and that's I think just a difference that we have. I mean,
Yeah.
at least today. Maybe I'll. Who knows where I'll wake up? At which side of the bed I'll wake up on tomorrow? But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's probably just like I said. We come pretty close at the end of the day. We use different language and
Yeah.
there is some real differences. We come pretty close, but there are real differences. Like
Yeah.
And see, and that probably actually, now that we're talking through this, kind of explains like some of the issues that I've had with some of the, like I just mentioned to you yesterday about the exclusivity of Christianity in the
Hmm.
Bible and how that
Yeah.
has caused me a lot of problems lately. Well, like, again, that solves for that problem, right? Because it's, while my path is Jesus, like, and I think that that is could it's a path for anybody to follow. Like, but I think the way, the truth, and the life is the path that he set forward. Like, it's the way, the truth, and life is the Alpha and Omega, the God, the divine within. It's coming to that realization. So whether you come to that through the Bible or through any other avenue, I don't think it. I've kind of at least today I've lost that exclusivity.
Yeah. Whereas to I retain it.
Right.
I believe that Jesus is Jesus is the way and the truth and life, and I think that that is exclusive to him.
Right.
But I believe that this way and this truth and this life is for everybody.
Yeah. It's a
So,
universal way.
yeah, so
Right.
I'm inclusive because I think that Jesus is inclusive. I believe that
Right.
because I believe that Jesus includes all of humanity in his lived life and his death. We all this is what the scripture says is we all died with him. There one died for all, therefore all died, right?
Right.
And that we were raised with him. Like everything that he does, hmm, everything he does is for us, and everything that he is doing in his life as fully God and fully man is making it possible for us to do also. Which is where like we talked about a little bit like the other day about like walking on water and all the stuff that seems impossible for us to do. Like, I mean, maybe we're supposed to be able to do that. You know,
Right.
I mean, I mean, he didn't tell his disciples to walk on water, but he did tell them to cast out demons, heal the sick,
Right.
do all these things. And like you pointed out, he said, do even greater things. You'll do even greater things than these. And he actually, that is actually in John 14,
Yeah.
where he says, I am the way, the truth, and life. But he says that in response to a question about him going to the Father, and then he in the very same scripture he says, "I am the way, the truth, and life, and no one comes to the Father but through me." So I mean, I do think that Jesus is the exclusive way, truth, and life.
Right.
But I think that that's
See, I
for
think,
everybody.
yeah, I mean, I think that that is probably the perfect way just to, if we're going to get the root of like where our differences lie, I feel like it's in that. And what I mean by that is, if I don't want to speak for you, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you conceptualize each individual human, including Jesus, as just that, individuals. Like, there is a you, there's a me, there's a Jesus, there's a Saul and a David, there's a Kelly and a Candace. Like, we are all completely separate individuals.
Not really. I wouldn't say that.
Whereas, okay, and no, I mean, I'm gonna let you like clarify that, but I'm gonna like,
Yeah, go ahead.
so whereas I don't believe, I believe that there's one source of consciousness, which is God, the breath of life that has been breathed into all humans. I believe that we are all individual in the sense that I'm experiencing life through these two eyes, but when I die, I'm going back to the source that I came from, which is just one. There's only one. So like, well, while our the new agey word for it would be incarnation, while in this current incarnation that I exist in is an individual, the consciousness behind the I that's asking who am I is just, it's like a molecule of water, and God is the ocean. So it's one individual drop of the water. So in that regard, what I mean is that I don't, while I see us as individuals in our current status, per se. I think that there is no individual in the end. It's all one spirit.
Mm. So I think that it's both is really, I guess, the my initial thought, um, because I believe that the whole drop in the ocean thing is for, I mean, to me, what I guess I would say to that is like, in him we live and move and have our being, right? That's what I mean. That's what I would mean by it. In using that, if I were going to use that same analogy to
Right.
try to describe what you're saying there, to me, that's what that means is in him we live and move and have our being. He's the very source and ground of being itself.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think that I'm with you on that, but I do think that the summing up of all things in Christ, the this end, you're talking about like returning, right? So to me, I don't think that that means that like I'm a drop that goes back into the ocean necessarily, and maybe that's just the wrong analogy for what for what I'm thinking of. But
Right.
like, I do think that there is so like when like in Jeremiah, whenever it says that when I formed you, like you sent that to me in the Francois Dutois.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was part of the intro to John, and he quotes from Jeremiah where he says that before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you.
Right.
Like knew who? He knew Jeremiah, right? So I think that there is a you. Like it's not just that there is um that there's not even a me. It's that there's that
Right.
everyone is just I don't even know how
It's
to articulate it.
that's what I was going to say. It's even hard to articulate because I don't disagree with that, but I think that the person, the you, the individuals, like I kind of explained that at the beginning, like who we are, who we see ourselves as, is just a summation. It's essentially a character that has been built of our experiences. And when I say character, that comes across as like a negative. I don't mean it in a negative way. We have no other way of concept. Like we are living our lives through our lives, like through our. I'm experiencing life through these eyes. Like so, what I am is a summation, and it even gets thicker than that because it's not just my own experiences and memories, but it's my parents and their parents' parents and all. You know what I'm saying? Like we are the summation. The life that I'm currently living is the summation of all these different factors that have made me who I am today. But if we strip all of that stuff away, at a core, what I think is that we're all the same. Like it's just that it's that breath of God that it speaks of in Genesis. That's it, our pure consciousness. So like, and I think like when I describe it that way, I think you can probably say why like I think that that's the real clear delineation between, and that's why we have a slight disagreement on this, right? Is because what you're saying, Jesus as it is, his humanity, his part to be a human, he has to be separate. He has to remain separate. He's different. Like because he's an individual. Like I feel like that even in what you were just describing, there is still a separateness. There's individuals. Whereas I think when you strip everything else away, all you're left with is I am, which is what the refiner's fire does. It burns all that stuff away, and all that's left is pure I am.
Mm, I don't know. I guess in that respect, I fail to see even the point of you being created.
I think it. Yeah, I mean, I think it gives it more purpose, perhaps, but it just depends on how you're looking at it. But I mean, it kind of goes back to something that you'd said to me in the very beginning of like all this deconstruction, reconstruction stuff of like God experiencing love. To experience love, there has to be more than one. Like if what I'm saying is true, then God is experiencing, to your point, it's actually something that you've said in this very episode. God is suffering with all of us. He's loving with all of us. He's
Yeah.
like experiencing life through all of us without us existing as individual incarnations as we do. God can't experience that. Like that is the point to me. Is like
Mm, perhaps. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I buy that. Not that last part, but like
yeah, I mean it's fine.
the
Like
whole individual versus like just
it's a lot to swallow.
yeah. I think that there's probably, and I just don't. There's probably a way to articulate it in a way that would make sense to me, maybe, or maybe there's a way to. I don't know. Something I have to think about. But for now,
It's
that doesn't make sense to me.
it's definitely a lot to swallow, and that's part of what makes it hard for me. Not necessarily talking to you because you're more open to things, but now you can probably see why it's hard for me to even like, you know what I mean? Like we've
Yeah.
had to talk for an hour and a half just to like make for me to even put a cohesive sentence together to where you can finally understand what I'm trying to tell you. Like it's very difficult. It's a lot to swallow, especially because we're coming. It's something I've been thinking about a lot about is because we in evangelicalism we're even people like us who have kind of left that worm theology behind. There's still some of that within us. Like there's I know that you feel it too because it was initially with me too. This idea of like, oh, Jesus can't be like me. Like I can be like Jesus. There's something like something there's some sort of difference like he's up here and I'm down here. Well, that is what worm theology is. You are down here like no, you're a son of God. Like we've got to start seeing ourselves as we truly are.
Well, I think that we only are because he is, though.
Well, and even in saying that, like yes, but the he to me is God. The he to you is say it.
It's Jesus.
Just say God. Like who is Jesus?
Who is Jesus?
Yeah.
Well, he's fully God and fully
Okay, there you go.
man.
So see,
But I'm saying that like the the only reason that I can live the life, the human life that I was always intended to live is because Jesus lived it.
maybe.
That's the remaking to me.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the recreating. Like without Jesus coming and living the life that he lived and making it possible for us to live the way that we were always meant to live, but couldn't because of this fallenness, this as a result of whatever we want to call it, at the beginning, the fall. And according to Maximus, we just as soon as Adam's created, he's fallen. He's just created fallen. But like, which is kind of it's weird. I don't.
I think John Crowder said Maximus was his favorite. I believe I was listening to him today.
Yeah. Well, there's so many good things, eh, really hard to understand things
Yeah,
in Maximus. But I really want to get Jordan Daniel Wood's book, the whole mystery of Christ, from I think that's the name of it.
that's exactly what John Crowder said in that video I was watching today. He was kind of going through some of the patristics he likes, and he said that Maximus was his favorite, but it's pretty hard stuff. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I listened to a podcast actually today, um, with Jordan Daniel Wood talking about Maximus and some of these things that we're talking about here.
like I know who that is.
You would like him, I think. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
But yeah, it's heady stuff. You know, it's stuff that like
Yeah,
you have to really think about, and then you aren't going to understand it, and then you think about it some more, and you still don't understand it, and then you might understand it a little bit more, and then you understand it less. And it's one of those things you have to chew on.
and that's part of this too, man. We're talking about stuff that like it's above our pay grade. No offense to you, but
Well, yeah,
I
no,
mean,
yeah.
like,
We started off saying that.
yeah, like this, what everything that I've said so far, and I think I articulated this beginning, and I hope that it's gotten through. Is like this is just how it makes sense to me currently. Like, I could be totally wrong. I don't know, but this is how it makes sense to me right now, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm always constantly like reading and thinking and listening and trying to learn more, but like
Yeah.
I'm not a scholar. I don't know. Like this is just what makes sense to me as a dummy with all this gray in his beard. Like this is where I'm at today, and I'm being open and honest about that, man. Like this is stuff that I've been wrestling with. Like this is stuff that I. This is sort of I talked about this several episodes ago, actually. Like when I first deconstructed, and like this is sort of about kind of how I had worked things out, but I did so maybe not as thought out. Like this is sort of how it made sense to me, and I had like the basic framework of it, but I hadn't put in the study. Like I'm several years into it now, you know what I mean? Like I can work it all out a little bit better to where it makes better sense. But yeah, I mean this is several years worth of deconstruction and reconstructing and then deconstructing again. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think I went through probably my 16th deconstruct, or maybe I'm right in the middle of my 16th deconstruction, actually, current in present state right now. Like, I don't know.
One thing that I on that podcast with Jordan Daniel Wood,
Yeah.
Chris Green was on there also with him, and something that he said I was really made a lot of sense to me, and it's kind of what I've tried to say at certain points tonight, which is that so I think that part of the reason that people deconstruct is because, for one, we haven't been educated and discipled in that the rich tradition of the church. Like all the stuff that Maximus has to say, all the stuff that Gregory Nyssa has to say about the
Mhm.
humanity of Jesus, we just don't know any of that unless we seek it out for ourselves now after the fact. But like a lot of that's been lost on us, particularly us in Protestantism and American evangelicalism specifically. But like, so that's thing number one. But because of that, that leads into the second thing I think, which is like we have certain assumptions about humanity and about God that are the result of that, I think, that caused in one sense our deconstruction. You know? Like it was a I know this is true for me. I don't want to speak for you, but for me, this was true. For me, it was like I deconstructed what was always a false image.
Right,
You know,
right.
it wasn't that like I'm trying to think how to word it. Like I was working with wrong assumptions to begin the deconstruction process in the first place. Like the questions that I had that led to my deconstruction were questions that I only had because I had all these wrong conceptions and assumptions
Right.
about myself and God in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of been our argument as to, and like that's what drives me nuts when people like push against deconstruction and talk about deconstruction as a bad thing and a thing to be avoided. And it's like, that's why I don't think it is. I think everybody should like at their own pace and when they're ready for it, of course. But like the
Right.
whole deconstruction isn't just throwing everything away. It's taking the trash out. Like it's getting rid of the stuff that doesn't need to. It should have never been there in the first place. Like
Yeah.
now, there's a danger in that, and I'll admit that straight up because I'm probably guilty of it myself. Is so to speak, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like going to the point of like, well, all blah blah blah. So I'm just gonna I don't believe anything anymore. I'm gonna throw it all away. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I think that that's a real danger, or a I don't even know if I'd say danger because now that I'm talking through it, I don't even know that that's a bad thing because what that does is give you a fresh starting point. And in a lot of ways, I think that that's actually better than some of the stuff that we're getting. So I'm not even I don't know, and that's probably just my negativeness coming out in me a little bit, like but.
Well, I think it depends on, I think it depends on what you do with it from that point. Like, I, like I know for myself that like because a lot of people it leads them into atheism,
Right.
and what but that atheism is rooted in a cynicism about this this conception they have of Christianity of
Right.
God that was false in the first place.
Right.
You know, but if you are never if you stop at this is wrong and never realize this is what's right, then you just remain in that state of cynicism perpetually, I guess.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same thing as what we talked about with the Bible. Like a lot of, the people that deconstruct their faith and leave the faith and become atheists, they still read the Bible in a fundamentalist sort of way,
right.
and that's what keeps them in that paradigm. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's that same sort of thing. It's like you deconstruct it, but you never reconstruct anything. You just stay in that state of like your mind frame is still in that fundamentalist mind frame, but you've just lost all the
Yeah.
stuff to fill in the gaps with it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
yeah. So that's, I mean, I guess the in the deconstruction thing, I guess that is the real. I don't even know if danger is the right word, but the real danger of it. But
Yeah. Well, and it can even affect your reconstruction, like because like if you say you have these ideals that certain conceptions of who God is and who you are, and then you reconstruct without realizing problems with your conception on those things, then you can reconstruct something that may make sense but isn't true fully,
right.
you know, and that's a danger for all of us. I mean, I'm sure I'm guilty of that
Yeah, I mean,
to some
anybody listening to
extent.
this knows I'm a heretic now, so for sure. I think that about me.
Yeah, yeah, like, it depends.
Yeah, I guess I think that that's an unfortunate thing, but I think it is a reality, especially if you're like if it's someone listening that comes out of fundamentalism or is in fundamentalism, like then I probably am a heretic to them. But like, I still like, I don't know, like I still think that I guess to me it's hard to see why because if anything it just enhances like I see God the divine in all people even when it's hard for me to see with my physical eyes, and it is sometimes, like, I still believe at the core, that's sort of the core of my or not fundamentalism, my universalism, even. You know what I mean? Is like, I think even the worst person that you can imagine, like, that's just all the crap that they've picked up at their time here. But, like, once all that crap is stripped away, all that's left is the divine, you know what I mean? Like, at the core of who they are. So, like, to me, that's even how my universalism works. Like, so it is. I think because in one way the people listening are going to hear the one thing that's going to stand out is like probably that they're going to think I have a low Christology, right? Like I don't because I don't see the exclusiveness in the person of Jesus because I don't believe in persons. Then that's going to make me a heretic. But I see that same thing that is being said in churches about the person of Jesus in all people. So it's not like I've left that behind either. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to articulate, but
I mean, I kind of know I think I know what you're saying. But
yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. It's hard, man. It's hard to explain, but I guess that the point is like I just know when I was hardcore fundamentalist, hardcore evangelical, like if somebody had said some of the stuff that I'd said today, then I wouldn't think very much of them.
yeah. I mean, that's unfortunate. Um, but it's a reality. Unfortunately, I think that there are going to be folks that hear what you're saying and aren't
Yeah.
going to know what to do with it. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with it all the time.
Right. Yeah, I know. And the hard thing about that, and this is where I'm at, and this is just partly just who I am as a person, is like I just can't pretend. I can't like and that's sort of been my that was always my pushback about the people who think that we're saved by what we believe. If you believe, you have to have faith and believe the right things, and then you'll be saved. Well, it's like I can't pretend to, I can't make myself believe something. You know what I mean? Like this is just me being honest with where I'm at today. And again, it could change tomorrow. Who knows? Like, but I can't pretend. Like, I'm not going to pretend. What's the point in pretending? I just want to be real. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I feel like there's tons that could be said.
So let's. It's been a pretty serious spot up to this point.
Okay. Yeah.
But we're talking. The whole point of this was to talk about Jesus' humanity.
Yeah.
So, how tall was Jesus?
Couldn't have been more than couldn't have been more than 5'7".
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty solid number. Really stands out to me. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
He's a short king.
Yeah.
What it is, especially, I was gonna say in spite of, but actually maybe especially depending on how you view Jesus' divinity. The fact that he is a human can have some pretty funny thoughts. Like, to be a human, I mean, even though you're trying to redefine what it means to be a human on me, Sean, but
Yeah.
part of being a human is going to the restroom.
Yeah.
It's getting stomach virus. It's having a runny nose, sneezing.
Yeah.
Uh, it's uh, it's a lot of things that's kind of funny to try to envision, like God, pure godness.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Uh, what's the prophecy in Isaiah talks about? He would have has no beauty that we would uh
Desire.
desire him.
Yeah.
You know, like it is really crazy to think of because Jesus lives this perfect human life and is fully God and fully man, and yet in John 6, whenever he's talking, telling the people about eating his body and drinking his blood, isn't that where they say it's isn't this Joseph's kid? Is
I
that where
can't remember if that's where they say that or not.
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like he's teaching and doing all this stuff, and they're people that have known him his entire life.
Right.
Apparently, he the whole like from the time he's a young boy, whatever it was, 12 years old. I don't know if it even says in the text, but from that point, whenever he's found in the temple until he's baptized by John, basically, like the the scriptural account is just complete silence, and apparently that there was nothing to write about
Yeah.
because his life was so ordinary
Yeah.
that these people that have known him his whole life are like, wait a second, what are you talking about, guy? I know your dad and them,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
like so I don't. Yeah, it is interesting to think about Jesus being fully God and fully man, and yet,
You think about the mundaneness of
yeah,
life. You know what I mean?
yeah, the
Especially
ordinariness.
like back then, because like our life now is mundane too, but like we live a more technologically based life where we're like we have vehicles that we drive to work and we work our jobs and we do all these other things. But like they didn't do that back then. I mean they worked jobs. Don't get me wrong, but like it was generally like where they lived too. Like they're just getting up, working, just
Yeah,
hanging out, just living life, like literally just hanging out, man.
yeah,
Like I think about those people that we've seen in Honduras. We've seen this a lot more in Honduras than I've ever seen anywhere else. But like just people hanging out,
yeah,
just like sitting outside, like doing nothing, just sitting,
yeah,
like no cell phones, no TVs, just sitting. And like
yeah,
that's how I envision Jesus just chilling. I don't know.
yeah,
Like you have to assume he played with the other kids.
yeah.
Now imagine if you were the bully of Jesus.
Well, he apparently would turn the other cheek.
You know, allegedly, but there is the infancy gospel of Jesus. Or have you ever heard about that one?
Uh, yeah, I vaguely know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's not in the Bible, of course. It's like an extra, like it's an ancient writing, but it's not like dated to as early as like the biblical writings or whatever. But it's supposedly like it's written to fill in that gap that you're talking about, like his childhood or whatever. But like I think if I remember correctly, there's like a portion in there where like people make fun of him. He like kills them, like other kids. He like strikes them dead because they make fun of him, and
Oh,
like
I see why it never made it into the canon.
exactly.
Yeah, because that's not Jesus.
Yeah, I
You
don't
don't know what
remember.
spirit you're of.
I don't know the exact details of it, but it was something crazy. Like Jesus, for sure, in that like writing, he for sure killed people. It was like
Yeah,
okay,
that's yeah. I don't like yeah.
I don't like that.
But like that is it's also what, what is so one thing that's really cool about that the mundaneness of his life and the ordinariness of his life is that like I said before, everything that he does, he makes possible for us, and he everything he does for us, and he doesn't everything he does, it brings about the necessary change for us. Doesn't change God,
Yeah,
and so like whenever he's baptized, he doesn't need to be baptized himself. He according to the tradition at least, and the Gospels, he was sinless, right?
right.
He didn't have any need for baptism for himself, but he's baptized for us. He makes the water holy for us, and I think he does that same thing in every aspect of his life, including his being in the womb, from womb to tomb.
I was about to ask you about that. Like, what do you? Because you just said everything he does for us. So like, what stage of development do you think that Jesus knew what he was doing? Like from the womb to the tomb, or
I don't know. I mean, we definitely see at least a strong hint of it by the time he's found in the temple teaching. He tells Mary, "I must." Um, he tells Mary that already feeling this call to do the Father's work,
right?
right? So I think in one sense he maybe has a strong like inclination or uh, I like idea
Yeah,
of it by I've heard 12. I don't know if he was 12 or not,
I don't remember if it
but
says an exact age at that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just a question to. It's one of those like, who knows? It's a fun question to ask. I mean, I tend to the way I conceptualize it, I kind of feel like it's his baptism is sort of that turning point. It's like when which I've kind of explained that before, my kind of conception of what happens there at the baptism, and then his subsequent like temptation in the wilderness. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like that's where he like understands. He comes into that understanding of who he is, who we are, and who he is, and so I kind of take it as that the baptism is sort of like that mm, mark of his life, whatever that. But I don't know. I mean, again, that's just speculation. I have no idea.
yeah, it's a significant moment in his life for sure, and I think that it like whenever he because there's different moments in his life, like his infancy, and then the whenever he's found in the temple, and then whenever he's baptized, those three moments. Pretty sure there's different language used to describe him, and it's he's teknon is like a young person.
Yeah,
This is what he's called. I think that's the Greek word that's used for him, and when he was found in the temple, and then weos is the word that's used for him whenever it says that. Uh, whenever the voice of the Father speaks after he's baptized and says, "This uh, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased." The word "son" there is weos, and it means like an adult son. So there is something really significant happening there. I think it's him stepping into this role.
right.
Um, did he know before that? Before he stepped into it officially? I don't know, but what I was saying about the ordinariness of his life, I think that what's really cool about that is he makes those moments holy by living them. Like so, like even the things that seem mundane and ordinary to us, that don't seem, because we tend to associate things that are holy with like things that are like extraordinary,
Right.
like the supernatural. We look at something. Sorry, we look at something supernatural and we're like, oh, there's God at work. But no, like God in Jesus is at work even in those like those moments that seem like throwaway moments to us.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's just really cool to think about.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's why, and to be fair, that's one of the reasons why I get a little bit frustrated with that. I started the episode out with about how it seems like we sort of downplay his humanness. Is like it's that very reason right there. Like I think it does take that away. Like when we downplay his humanness, it's not his humanness doesn't take away from his divinity. Like God is not a finite resource. It's not a limited resource. You know what I mean? Like it's not gonna use
Yeah,
up all of his godness. Like it's it's the very act of being human that is holy. Like in and of itself. You know what I mean? Like we lose that when we diminish Jesus's humanity. I think is maybe how I'd like to say that. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I think it's holy because he made it holy.
Don't argue with
It's always going to come back to that. For me, it's all about Jesus. Yes to everything you're saying, but Jesus.
me. Okay.
I mean, I don't even know if that's not if that's even how you meant that, but that's just how it came across to me.
What is downplaying Jesus in it?
No, like whenever you said being human is holy in and of itself,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I
yeah.
was saying that too.
Okay.
Is like yes, being human is those moments that we're talking about, like being human in that sense is holy, but it's holy because of Jesus and his lived life, I think. So anyway. Yeah. Well, we've been going for a minute. Um,
Hour and 47 of them.
yeah. This was an interesting one.
It was a different one. We've never done one like this before.
Yeah. Well, for one, we're being doing video.
It's true.
I don't know if
I thought it would distract me more than it did. I was actually locked into you. Like I was
yeah,
engaged in this one.
yeah. Hopefully, I can get the video to upload. Hopefully, it'll work out.
I was kind of like you at first. You said, "No, I'm just gonna want to stare at the camera the whole time." But like, no, once we got going, I was locked in.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? Does it feel good? Feel good about it or no?
About the topic,
Yeah, the episode.
I mean, I think it was a fun episode. I think it'll be an interesting one because this is definitely going to be one where the audience is going to hear way more of the disagreements between us than they ever have.
Right.
But I mean, I think that it's a good one. I
That's
think
why
that's a good combo, though.
that's why I liked the episode. It's
Yeah,
because normally me and you are pretty like we don't play up our differences, and even when there are differences, we kind of like tamper those down. It feels like maybe not intentionally, but because we're a tag team here, we're working together.
yeah,
But like it felt like this time we see this different. We're going to talk about the differences. Like the differences sort of highlight the episode, and it was different. We've never done anything like that before. So
yeah, yeah,
but I like those kind of conversations. They engage me. I get spirited in those conversations. And I can get spirited with you because you understand that. Like,
yeah. That's the thing. It depends on because we were kind of talking about that with Kat in the text the other day.
yeah,
Like having a conversation with someone where you can get spirited like that, and there's not you know that it's in the end it's not changing anything.
right.
Um, I don't know.
It's hard to do. I mean, because we've been best friends for years and years and years. So like
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Like we have these conversations every single day.
Well, there's also this is something I didn't say in the text message, but there's also an element of this that's like this is something I told Candace the other night, but I think that like me and you can have these conversations to disagree. For one reason why we can do this is because we've kind of been on this journey together.
Yeah,
You know that I have actually thought through these things,
right,
and I know that you have actually thought through these things. We both know that both of us are not, at least intentionally, trying to give cheap accounts of all of this stuff.
right.
So like there is that element, whereas like depending on who you're talking to, you may not have that same level of, I want to say respect, but I don't know if that's the right word or not.
That was the word that came to my mind when you were speaking.
Like a sort of like personal knowledge of like I
Yeah,
know that you've put the time and effort into this and really thought about this, and so even if I disagree, I respect your process.
right,
Um, but I don't. It's harder to have a conversation with someone when you don't have that.
right. That's true.
I think.
Yeah. And there's always an emotional element. I mean, these are big things. Like these are important things. This topic that we were talking about today and the things that we talked about today are very important to people. Like
Yeah.
you're talking about sometimes to most people that that would be the audience of this show. This is like the most important thing we could talk about. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's people care when they get into discussions like this. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of feelings, lots of emotions that are tied to the topic. So,
Oh yeah. For sure.
yeah. But I do feel like I'm glad that I had the chance to kind of explain some of this stuff more because all along I felt like because this is the first time we've ever really kind of delved into the way I conceptualize like my non-dualism and all that stuff for the audience. But me and you have sort of talked about it, a little bit before, but I'd never had felt like I had did a good job of getting across what I meant by it, and I knew that there was sort of a language issue between us because I could see that we are close, but not, like there are real differences, and I don't want to pretend that there aren't, but like not as big as we thought that there were. You know what I mean? Like I think that we still end up pretty close. We just have different ways of conceptualizing it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm glad to have the opportunity to kind of dive into that and explain that a little more clear. I mean, that doesn't mean that I made it clear as mud, but, and, I'm
Yeah.
glad to have that opportunity to kind of clarify it a little bit. Or maybe I just made it worse. Who knows?
No, I mean I think I do understand it more
Yeah.
than I did before this conversation. I think there's still some um not being sure quite how to think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think that I understand more what you mean now than I did.
Yeah.
Unless I just completely misunderstood everything you said.
That's also possible.
Yeah.
Bow body.
Bow body. What are we doing? We're making acronyms.
Yeah.
Well, are we
I'm trying to think about if there's anything else we want to talk about. We were all over the place tonight in a good way.
yeah, I mean there's definitely other stuff that we could talk about. We've been going for an hour and 53 minutes.
It's also dinner time.
Yeah, I'm sure Candace is getting real hungry.
As the people can see, I'm a large man. I'm hungry.
Hungry.
I'm hungry.
Spicy chips?
Finn will be ticked. He's not here.
Me and Candace are probably gonna get some spicy chips.
Well, I mean, we might have to.
Hmm.
We'll see.
Well, are we signing off for now?
What are we going to talk about next time?
I have no idea.
Me either. I don't. I don't hate the idea of getting some guests on. They don't necessarily have to be people that want to fist fight us, but
It can be.
it can be. I can handle myself.
I'll just turn the other cheek like a good Christian.
I would like to think I would, but I would probably throw hands. I'd have to work. I try to be non-violent, but it's not my nature. I'm a violent man by nature.
Hopefully, we never have to find out.
I've had to work pretty. I've had to work pretty hard to be the way I am, if I'm being honest. Like, because it's very. I'm by nature. I'm very angry, like easily angered. I'm not chill. I'm more apt to swing than to turn the other cheek. That's just who I am, but or was, but I've worked on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty chill. I've always been pretty chill.
It worked out pretty good for me when I was playing football because I was violent. I played violently.
Yeah. But until recently, I've never really been someone who was like completely averse to violence. I was just, it takes a lot to really get me to that point because I'm pretty chill.
Yeah,
I got a long fuse, you might say.
I'm sort of the exact opposite, where by nature I'm short fused, very easy to get angry, and when I get angry, it's explosive, but it's very short. It's like you know, and then I'm back to being okay. Like I don't hang on to things. I don't hold grudges.
Oh yeah, I don't really hold grudges or anything like that either. I'm just saying it takes like in comparison to some other folks, like the point that it would take for me to actually exert violence
Yeah,
is probably longer than for some.
yeah. I mean, I would like to think that I've made some progress there, some good progress, but 18-year-old me, no. But you know what? Who couldn't say that? We all get
That's
a little bit softer with age, right?
yeah. Hopefully, I mean, I feel like you're just probably not maturing at all if you're the exact same as you were when you were 18
Right.
in that respect. But yeah,
Mature.
mature.
Let's go eat.
Okay.
Freaking bah. Yeah, I don't know, man. They might hate that episode.
It'll be alright.
Do you feel all right with it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. I thought it was a good combo. I just, um, I don't know. It was an interesting one because, like, it was. I still feel like we really do disagree, but I think now we maybe have a better understanding of where we disagree,
Yeah.
where the disagreement is, and the nature of it.
And it really does. For me, it always has kind of a thought, at least. But now, like to your point, I understand it a little better. But I always kind of thought that the issue did kind of come back to that.